2018 has been a year of high drama and revolving doors in Parliament. After plotting in those corridors, fomenting the coup, Jacob Zuma was gone. Step in Cyril Ramaphosa with possibly the narrowest win in ANC history. And then, of course, Malusi Gigaba, not quoting from Chaucer, but a famous rapper saying, "We're going to be all right." And then promising he wasn't going to go, reluctantly left. And Patricia de Lille, saying that she couldn't handle the bullying anymore, went off to form her own party. Now this acrimony culminated in a verbal and physical fisticuff between the EFF and Gang. Now, I should imagine those who remain there are delighted that Parliament has gone into recess for a wee break before it all whips up again into a frenzy ahead of the all-important 2019 elections. And the two who've been listening to those conversations and been giving us the lowdown are Annika Larsen and Kiewit. What a year, and the start of the big climaxes. Jacob Zuma resigning.
I have therefore come to the decision to resign as President of the Republic with immediate effect.
How did that play out?
Well, I think it was quite interesting that if you have to start in 2017 and Jacob Zuma's last question and answer session in the National Assembly, ending on somewhat of a high, and obviously that tension between himself, his own caucus, as well as the opposition, I think it was quite evident that Jacob Zuma was unlikely to return to the National Assembly or Parliament in 2018, this because of the ANC's elective conference. And then when returning to Parliament in 2018, and with that result of Cyril Ramaphosa winning that elective conference, it was quite clear that it was unlikely that Jacob Zuma would be returning. But this then, of course, created lots of tension for the ANC, for a parliament dominated mostly by ANC deployees. And it was quite clear that many people did not know what to do, especially since we had Cyril Ramaphosa still as then deputy president, but also then leading the governing party.
And the lead up to this, I mean, the whispers in Parliament and the fear, huh?
I mean, it was where the palace coup was, the plotting of the palace coup really started. I mean, Parliament is a very unsafe and uncertain place for a president that was proportionally as paranoid as former President Zuma, because, you know, MPs and ministers can meet up in the passages and hallways and have little groups and have little caucus sessions and quorums and plot the way forward. And as Lester said, there was fear and loathing because a lot of people were worried about keeping their jobs and they didn't know what side to move on in order to keep in favour with what administration was going to come or go. And as you remember, Zuma was digging his heels in, and he wanted to do that State of the Nation address. So there was a lot of negotiations going on behind the scenes that we could actually see happening before us. Ministers driving up to the President's office here at Tynhuys, Parliament, and then whizzing back again in these convoys. And I think we literally sat there sometimes 18 hours a day, just outside the President's office, just watching.
And he really wanted to do that speech, didn't he? He really wanted the State of the Nation. I'm just wondering what he was hoping to achieve by having it. And then, of course, the postponement.
That's right. I think what the moment where I saw things change in the parliamentary precinct, when I think it was Jeff Radebe pull up and his car pull up in front of the National Assembly building, going up, meeting with Baleka Mbete, and shortly afterwards coming out. I think some journalists asked him, were you meeting the Speaker of the National Assembly? What's been decided? And from that tone, that body language of people coming in and out of Baleka Mbete's office, it was almost plain to see that a postponement was coming. And we must remember, postponing the opening of Parliament and State of the Nation is a big deal. It's three branches of government coming in at the same place at the same time, the executive, the legislature and the judiciary. At the same time, you have police, the armed forces all coming there at the same time. So there's lots of expense that is obviously paid to bring everyone there.
I mean, the Defence Force, etc. And the State of the Nation address before had been, you know, there were suddenly weapons on the precinct. There was the whole issue of this cell phone grabber device which was allegedly put in by someone from state security, listening in on everybody's telephones. So people were really paranoid and wondering what was going to happen next, whether the police and the SANDF were going to move on to the precinct, on what side was the army, where were they going to go, was Zuma going to rally his troops? It really was the place to be.
Why do you think
in terms
it
of
didn't go that
witnessing
way?
it all? I think the art of negotiation, and I think in the end the party won, rather. I think, yeah, the party won out.
I think there was also a point where Jacob Zuma knew that the writing was on the wall for himself and that he was not safe amongst his own ANC colleagues in the ANC caucus. If you can remember last year, rules of impeachment were already being developed by MPs, which was then tabled later this year, almost to no real effect because they seem quite happy with this current president. But already since 2017, rules of impeachment were already being developed, and whether Jacob Zuma would stay on as president, he was almost definitely going to be removed by Parliament.
And the drama continues. Cyril Ramaphosa takes his place, but narrow margin.
I mean, I think he's got the least votes at any ANC conference of any, in the ANC's history. But there was such a change once he came onto the precinct. It was quite extraordinary. I mean, I felt there was a massive exhalation. People just breathed out, and the sense of paranoia that had been building up, it disappeared.
And the fact it even had an impact on journalists.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, in the past, and I'd been covering Jacob Zuma since 2007 or so, if you get in the way of his convoy and his bodyguards when he's on his way in or on his way up, you're told to get out the way. I mean, there's just, you don't stand, you don't hover around. And I remember one of the first days, President Cyril Ramaphosa, on the day of Sona, he came up to the front of the podium to practice with no police. In fact, or no SANDF or bodyguards. In fact, I was standing there and I wasn't sure it was him because I thought this can't be.
How can he possibly do that?
How can there just be this guy with his wife? Yeah, standing there. I mean, this is kind of weird, right? And we were allowed to go up to him and say, "Hi, Mr. President," and he chatted to us. And I remember the first time I squashed myself against a wall and I put my head down because I thought, "Oh, hell's coming. I better just get out the way." And he said to me, "Good morning." He said, "What is wrong with you?" And I said, "I'm so terribly sorry I'm in your way." And he said,
"Cowering wreck."
He said, just good morning, and things sort of started changing from that. I don't know if that'll carry on, but that's certainly the Tuma Mina vibe that was brought onto the precinct.
I think regardless of your politics and your attitude towards Jacob Zuma or Cyril Ramaphosa, is that there was a sense of relief that night of the State of the Nation address. I know a few journalists went round to the neighbouring a pub around the corner from Parliament to have that release. Not necessarily in terms of celebrating the election of Cyril Ramaphosa, but we've just been through this emotionally charged, draining 2 weeks. And I think for many, not only journalists, but staff around Parliament...
They were traumatised, actually.
It was
probably not even 2 weeks. I mean, it's been a long time coming, hadn't it, this sense of uncertainty and concern.
That's right. Just to couple on to what Annika said about the accessibility, a few days after Ramaphosa was elected in the National Assembly, presidents don't usually come out of the front door of the National Assembly. There's an underground tunnel that goes all the way to the office in Tenes. Cyril Ramaphosa, well, he stopped doing it now. He's been doing it less and less.
He's been driving his security team mad.
He came out of the National Assembly, looked around. There were some kids and some visitors to the gallery there. Waved and waved. I was doing a crossing with, I think it was Jeremy Maggs that day, and I said, "Sorry, Jeremy, I'm going to try my luck. I'm going to walk up to the president, walk with him all the way to Tenes, and try and ask him a question." And just that accessibility. That was quite a relief, and a lot has changed in the last 8 or 9, 10 months, but that did set the tone not only for the way journalists deal with the president and the presidency, but also the atmosphere around Parliament itself.
Let's carry on with change of tone. Malusi Gigaba, quoting from Kendrick Lamar.
We're going to be right. We're going to be all right.
We're going to be all right? I mean, what was that
We
all
all knew
about?
it wasn't going to be all right.
What was that about?
The retention of Malusi Gigaba as the finance minister was part of some sort of conciliatory deal between Cyril Ramaphosa and the ANC. Many people also felt that because of the damage done in the last 9 years of Jacob Zuma, and also critical to that, many people argue, is Malusi Gigaba during his tenure in public enterprises and then in the finance minister at the end of Jacob Zuma's presidency, that they were to blame for what has largely gone wrong in South Africa. And many people I've spoken to say that this was actually a position that Cyril Ramaphosa put him in, says, you did the bad work, you did the dirty work, now you're going to have to fix it. And it's through that tone that Malusi Gigaba tried to put a silver lining on an economy which was clearly in the doldrums. And quoting, as he says, urban poet Kendrick Lamar, we're going to be all right. And
it didn't really work, did it?
It didn't really work.
And he knew, I mean, I remember him going in, he knew, we all knew that it was going to be a matter of time before he wasn't going to be in that position of finance minister anymore. I think Lester's right that he, like a few other ministers who are still actually in cabinet, those were compromised positions and part of Ramaphosa's delicate dance in keeping the party together ahead of 2019.
And two more seismic events, I know totally different, but the land debate and VBS.
I think I'll take the land debate. That essentially came out as an instruction from the ANC's elective conference, where they firmly put land expropriation or land reform on the agenda and on the policy discussions. It's happened really quite quickly since the
9 months of hearings.
But also the EFF, right? I mean, they probably expedited it, didn't they?
Well, they're going to take the credit for it. I mean, they are the ones in that'll go down in history as bringing the motion forward for the Section 25 amendment, which is the first, it would be, should happen, the first amendment to the Bill of Rights. I think we've had 17 constitutional amendments, but not in Section 2. So they want to take the credit for that, and there is some tension between them and the ANC now as to who's actually going to get the glory for this.
I don't think that we can argue that Cyril Ramaphosa has been campaigning for the 2019 general elections since taking office, since making that first State of the Nation address, with the Tumamina campaign in this very feel-good spirit, but also satisfying constituencies within the ANC and also many South Africans, particularly poor and black South Africans who have been marginalized from the economy. And I think this whole process, driven by the EFF on the sidelines, but I think more importantly by the ANC directing those committee meetings, it has also been a way to go to the electorate, go to the support base ahead of the 2019 general elections and say, this is what we have done in terms of forwarding this agenda of radical land reform. We've gone through this process in a very short 9 months. I've travelled 9 provinces, various town halls and discussions to get to just recently the report being adopted and voted on in the National Assembly.
I think that it's going to come down. I think the fighting is going to start as soon as that ad hoc committee sits, though, because the EFF and the ANC really differ on their views on land use, and so the constitutionality of that wording is going to be tested in the Constitutional Court. I think that's part of it.
And will that have a dramatic impact on the implementation of it ultimately?
I mean, I see this happening 5 years down the line.
I don't think we're going to have it's not going to happen before the next elections. Obviously, there's another committee that has to be set up, more rounds of public participation, more rounds of evidence and testimony given, and of course, besides that, obviously there's going to be litigation in the court with opposition parties already stating that we're going to fight this as much as possible. Of course, there is the ideological difference between the ANC and the EFF, who make up that 2/3 that is needed to change the constitution. Yeah. The EFF believes that land and private property should be in the custodianship of the state. the ANC obviously doesn't believe that. So unless there is some clarification on the exact wording of that constitutional amendment and whether those court proceedings happen very quickly, this is not going to be passed before the elections.
So a long way to go, and long way to go before anyone from VBS gets what they put in. I mean, they'll never get what they put in, but I mean...
Yeah, at the time, I think, ministers were calling for there to be prosecutions as soon as possible. Now there's a call for a forensic report. All the municipalities, I think at a municipal level, there's been some kind of censure. But the big names, the Hawks just seemingly don't have the capacity, although that report by Advocate Terry...
Tilani.
Sorry?
Tilani.
No, it wasn't.
No.
Anyway.
We're going to have to cut that.
That report.
That report, that was supposed to have helped the Hawks, but they have no forensic capacity. And because of that, they're really struggling to get to present an indictment to the prosecution that is going to give them a watertight case.
For me, the VBS matter raises two issues. The first being is the set of teeth that parliamentary committees grew in the last few months of Jacob Zuma's presidency. The committees being given the power by the chairperson Cedric Frolick, a senior ANC member, to investigate any ministers, any government entities who are accused of malfeasance. And I think because of that, there was a great deal of interest, not only in VBS, but matters surrounding that, like the issue of the Northwest Province going in under administration, where now we're seeing that Northwest mayors had deposited money into VBS. So there's a direct link there. The second point is the Finance Committee also forwarding this policy agenda of the ANC into looking into radical economic transformation, especially where it comes to the banking sector. I know that one of the policy suggestions by the ANC was the changing of the mandate of the Reserve Bank, and that issues regarding VBS, a independent black-owned bank, really struck to the heart of what the ANC is trying to discuss, is that we need to break the monopoly of the four major banks and really support smaller black-owned banks to forward that agenda of radical economic transformation.
And whether to save VBS, I think that's, was another big issue and a contentious point.
Eskom and the reports into how it worked.
I mean, that as soon as the House Chair was gave the go-ahead for 4 committees to look into Gupta naturalisation, what had happened under Minister Zwane at Mineral Resources and Mining, what had happened at Public Enterprises, Eskom and Denel. Those were really the beginning. We knew that there was going to be change coming. For once, the committee, especially the Public Enterprises Committee, was a committee that was completely united across party lines. They were determined to work together to slowly, for the first time, dismantle state architecture and state capture architecture. And we'd seen it in the Standing Committee of Public Accounts before. We'd seen Lynn Brown at Public Enterprise, former Public Enterprises Minister, etc., coming in. And when you get an explanation from some of these CFOs and revolving board chairs, everything seems very legitimate, and everything seems, unless you're a forensic accountant, absolutely plausible. It's only when the hearing started and you started hearing from people working at Eskom and other state-owned enterprises, you realized what was actually happening, and you just hadn't seen it. And I think that was a problem a lot of people had. They were so close to the court base, they couldn't see the bigger picture. And that was all about Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan, who sat on that committee as an MP, and he was a very diligent MP, about joining the dots. And that was really the start of joining the dots.
I think when South Africans see or think of Parliament, they see the theatre of the National Assembly, the shouting and the heckling.
And it's theatre. I mean,
it is definitely
like
theatre.
on the precinct at all.
But when you step into committees like the Public Enterprises Committee looking into Eskom, you saw this diligence, this almost forensic, in-depth analysis by ordinary MPs, which people tend to forget because they generally backbenchers, so they don't get much of the airtime in the National Assembly. But it's that real hard work.
They work very hard.
I wonder what they do. So, you know, good to see them in action.
Committees are really the engine room of Parliament, with the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces chamber really just being the theatre of it all.
Yeah. And the prize, I think, Jane, sorry to interject, I think the prize for the best, hardest working committees this year must go to Public Enterprises and the Standing Committee of Public Accounts, because we have both sat until very late at night and very early in the morning with MPs working really hard to try and find out about this fruitless and wasteful expenditure that's been going on and the fallout of state capture over the years. And those committee MPs have worked really hard to come to grips with
Okay,
exactly
and let's end it on a high where, you know, we've got a department that is actually doing it and doing it for others and doing it successfully. Thank you, both of you.